A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today we are talking to union members who are organizing across the South. First we'll be talking to the United Campus workers about their latest, and then we will be talking to a worker from the International Rescue Committee in Texas about their union organization campaign. We will also be talking about some updates, some of the latest news from miners in Mexico and the Labor Council right here in North Alabama. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. We got a voicemail last week. We have it queued up to respond to in the second half of the show, and I haven't done a whole lot of prep, so we will definitely have time for calls today if you want to call in. So go ahead and get that number ready and make the call. We will answer it. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular on our website, TVLR.fm, and from that website, you can navigate to several things like donations, our merch store, and where to find us and listen to the program online. We are also on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate. You can also buy our logo cap on our merch store, tvlr.fm/store. And finally, you can go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report if you would like to become a patron. And if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Absolutely. Definitely appreciate those sponsors. And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who believe that our labor movement and our working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener today. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
With that, let's jump into last week in Southern labor. So here is what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from July 19th to the 26th. In new union campaigns, 400 workers in one bargaining unit are involved in a raid. 334 workers across 8 bargaining units began new union campaigns, and 10 workers in one bargaining unit are in a new decertification election. The United Football Players Association is attempting to raid 400 workers who are football players at the United Football League Enterprises in Arlington, Texas, who are currently represented by the United Steelworkers. Longtime listeners may remember the controversy around this, but to recap in brief, the United Steelworkers organized USFL players but failed to organize XFL players, but now represent all the players post-merger in the UFL. The USW, the United Steelworkers, did this campaign with the United Football Players Association, which was not a union at the time, and the UFPA feels like they did not understand all of the ramifications of organizing under the auspices of the United Steelworkers as opposed to organizing themselves, and publicly declared some months ago their intention to seek to take over representation from the USW. With this election filing, they are making good on that promise with presumably a minimum of support from 30% of their fellow players. The employer filed a petition after a majority of the workers at Specs Family Partners in Dallas, Texas, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters Local 745. 51 workers at the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, NASTAD, in Washington, D.C., filed a petition to hold a union election with the Washington Baltimore News Guild, WBNG CWA, Local 32035. 8 workers at American Electric Power in San Angelo, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. 12 workers at Consolidated Waste Services in Fajardo, Puerto Rico, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Central General de Trabajadores. 31 workers at the Kroger Fulfillment Center in Forest Park, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 528. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Communication Workers of America, CWA, as the union representing 10 workers at AT&T Mobility in Houston, Texas. 48 workers at Environmental Air Systems in High Point, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA, Local 421. 9 workers at Veterans Enterprise Technology Solutions in St. Louis, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 42. 60 workers at Blackfish Federal in St. Louis, Missouri, also filed a petition to hold a union election with LIUNA, Local 42. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 115 workers at MBM Logistics in Orlando, Florida, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters Local 385. In campaign updates, workers organizing with the Teamsters at Amazon's largest air hub in northern Kentucky went on a one-day strike last week in protest of the company's illegal union busting. This Amazon air hub is just across the street from a recently Teamsters unionized DHL facility, and workers from DHL had been critical in their support of the Amazon campaign. In election results, 96 workers in 6 bargaining units are newly unionized. 172 workers in 5 units voted against unionization, and 1 unit of 33 workers withdrew their union election petition. 18 workers at Starbucks in Roswell, Georgia, voted 12-2 in favor of unionization with the Starbucks Workers United, as did 17 workers at a Starbucks in Alpharetta, Georgia, unanimously. 48 workers at Hendersonville Community Cooperative in Hendersonville, North Carolina, voted 33-8 in favor of unionization with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 1996. 21 workers at Point Broadband Fiber Holding in Bristol, Virginia, voted 5-16 against unionization with IBEW, Local 934. 7 workers at Southwestern Electric Power Company voted 2-4 against unionization with IBEW, Local 386. 94 workers at Lufkin U.S. Acquisition Company in Claremore, Oklahoma, voted 26-63 against unionization with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 7 workers at Sinclair Television in Arlington, Virginia, voted 6-1 in favor of unionization with the National Association of Broadcast Employees and Technicians, NABET, CWA. 2 workers at Jones Lang LaSalle Americas in Washington, D.C., voted 1-0 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 99. 3 workers at Spectrum Management in Washington, D.C., voted 1-1 in a union election with IUOE Local 99, and ties go to the employer. 63 workers at Emporia Rehabilitation and Health Center in Emporia, Virginia, voted 33-3 in a decertification election to keep Workers United as their union. 4 workers at Valero Refining Company in Memphis, Tennessee, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the USW, United Steelworkers. 47 workers at Rainbow Blossom in Louisville, Kentucky, voted 15 to 25 against unionization with UFCW Local 227. And 31 workers at Sigma Network in Pryor, Oklahoma, withdrew their petition for a union election with LIUNA Local 107. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, SpaceX sought and last week won an injunction from a federal court judge in Texas that prevents the NLRB from processing a common unfair labor practice charge against the company on the grounds that the whole structure of the National Labor Relations Board is unconstitutional. As we wait for this case to make it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and eventually the Supreme Court, many more employers will likely seek similar injunctions. The NLRB dropped its case before the Fifth Circuit, attempting to defend its new joint employer standard. And in strikes and bargaining updates, the National Education Association, the country's largest union, has now locked out its own union staff for the better part of a month and is threatening to cut off health insurance, something even General Motors did not do during the UAW's 2019 strike. As AT&T's Southeastern contract is set to expire, the union representing many of the company's employees, CWA, put out a report about how poor working conditions are affecting service of AT&T customers. The TVA has signed a landmark agreement with the North America Building Trades Unions to improve working conditions on TVA projects. The International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE members, overwhelmingly ratified the new Hollywood Basic and Area Standards Agreement. This covers workers in the South, like Georgia, as well as in Hollywood. Macy Stalker at the American Prospect has a piece highlighting Southern worker organizing at Waffle House with a testimony from one 29-year Waffle House worker and organizer with the Union of Southern Service Workers, saying that she will see her hourly wage increase from $2.92 an hour after 29 years of employment at Waffle House to $8.45 an hour as a result of the union's pressure. More Perfect Union has a feature about a movement of American and Mexican truckers that went on strike last week in Texas, including an interview with from listener and friend of the show, Billy Randall. Austin airport workers, organized with Unite Here Local 23, are taking a strike vote as their current union contract closes in on the August 8th expiration date. A key demand is a $25 an hour minimum wage. In political and legislative updates, the Teamsters have endorsed the Railroad Safety Act of 2024, which, among other things, mandates a 2-person crew on the rails. 7 unions representing approximately half of all U.S. union members have called on the Biden administration to halt all military aid to Israel to force a ceasefire. These unions participated in protests in D.C. as Netanyahu addressed Congress. The black mayor of New Bern, Alabama, has finally obtained the keys to the city and the ability to serve as mayor, years after he won his election, after a white minority in the town cooed him out of the office. Japanese steel company Nippon has hired Mike Pompeo to help complete the purchase of U.S. steel. After Biden dropped out and unions quickly coalesced behind Kamala Harris, with her securing endorsements from AFGE, ATU, IATSE, AFT, NNU, SEIU, NAB2, and the AFL-CIO, among others, the UAW has not endorsed Kamala yet. Despite the swift endorsements, unions are now privately expressing serious concern about some potential VP picks. Mark Kelly of Arizona, for example, has been a longtime opponent of the PRO Act, although he has recently changed his tune. He has also refused to confirm David Wheel to the DOL's Wage and Hour Division and has refused to confirm Julie Su as Secretary of Labor. Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania has been a strong proponent of school privatization and a fierce ally of Israel, refusing to call for a ceasefire and attacking students and union members at the University of Pennsylvania as they protested Israel's assault on Gaza. The top picks from unions are reportedly Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. In internal union affairs, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Shawn O'Brien, retweeted an article from Senator Josh Hawley saying it is, quote, 100% on point. In this article, Hawley claimed that U.S. companies were increasing profits by outsourcing American jobs to fund transgender surgeries and DEI programs. The president of the Teamsters LGBTQ caucus expressed concerns about this seeming endorsement of homophobia and other, hatred towards gender minorities, to Shawn O'Brien, causing O'Brien to respond saying in part, quote, "I am fully committed to fighting for all Teamsters, regardless of whether they identify politically as a Democrat or Republican, or their gender, ethnicity, race, or sexual orientation. It is certainly regrettable that my retweet caused consternation and confusion among members of the LGBTQ caucus. Please be assured that I will keep advocating for our LGBTQ plus members as I have from day one." And finally, from listener submissions, friend of the show, McKenna Schuler, has begun a newsletter outside of her day job as staff reporter for the Orlando Weekly. This newsletter, Caring Class Revolt, will cover labor in Florida. Subscribe at caringclassrevolt.substack.com. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in the next week's roundup. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back to talk to members of the United Campus Workers about their organizing in the South.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPACT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you've got anything to add, we will take your call, bring you on the air. Appreciate everybody tuning in, having a good time this morning. We have 25, 30 people watching us online, and not that many people have liked the stream. Go ahead and like the stream if you haven't. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We have on the line Brooks Howe, UCW CWA Local 3821 member from Auburn University. UCW is the United Campus Workers. Really excited to talk to Brooks about the organizing that UCW has going on in the South and some of the recent developments. Brooks, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on. Happy to be here.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Appreciate all that you're doing to build worker power in the South, particularly in the public sector. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you're a member of United Campus Workers.
Yeah, so my name is Brooks. As was mentioned, I'm a PhD student at Auburn University in the physics department. I'm just finishing up my second year, so I'll be a third year come the fall. I joined United Campus Workers about a year ago, and I'm involved in the welcome committee to help people who recently joined the union feel welcome to the union and get involved as soon as possible. And I recently attended the United Campus Workers Southeast inaugural convention.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to ask you about that inaugural convention. And I was lucky enough to get a chance to talk with some of y'all on the beginnings of that convention. At least some of the Alabama folks really enjoyed that. But before we get into the convention, could you just remind people a little bit about United Campus Workers? What kind of organizing model do you have, and what kind of workers can join United Campus Workers?
So United Campus Workers is a union which is for the public universities around the country. And basically, if you make a paycheck from a university, a state-funded university, you are eligible to join United Campus Workers. Particularly in the South, we have to do a very particular kind of labor organizing. So because we live in Alabama and a right-to-work state, we have to do something called pre-majority, where basically there's little to no chance of getting a union contract for the workers. However, we still are able to put pressure on leaders at the university to sort of try and get them to make the right choice. At the end of the day, we can attend public events, we can attend people's offices, we can make petitions, and currently we actually have a higher wage campaign going, demanding higher wages for graduate students, a minimum graduate stipend throughout campus. We have several staff demands as well, and faculty demands that go with that. And we plan on bringing that to the president of the university and the CFO. So we do things like that. I also mentioned that we have faculty and staff demands as well. So I myself am a graduate student, but we do something that's called wall-to-wall organizing, which is different than some of the other higher education unions that you might have heard about the country. For instance, in Alabama, we actually include in UCW all faculty, staff, and student workers within the same union. And so that gives us, for sort of organizing like the pre-majority organizing is really benefited from that, because you already just have more members by factoring them in by having all job classes at a university eligible to join.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that wall-to-wall organizing I think is really important, and is something I really appreciate about United Campus Workers, the fact that you are trying to organize any worker on campus, like you said, anyone who draws a paycheck, the various classifications, because ultimately you have the same employer, so you have shared interests and you can build more power together. And, as you mentioned, in Alabama, as with much of the South, there are not collective bargaining rights for public sector employees. So folks who work at Auburn University or Alabama, UAH, the various universities and colleges across the state, like you said, there's right now, under the current legal framework, a collective bargaining agreement may not be on the horizon, but there's so much more that you can do to still win for your members and still win better wages, better benefits, better working conditions. So really appreciate that. And you mentioned earlier about the Southeast Convention. It was a first of a kind. Tell us a little bit about the convention. Why were y'all gathering together, and what were some of the things that came out of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently we had our inaugural United Campus Workers Southeast Convention occur in Birmingham, Alabama, at a CWA local hall that they have there. And basically it was, why I say it was the inaugural convention, a lot of the states in the Southeast used to be part of their own locals. And Alabama was included in that. But we recently recently combined all of them basically into one local, which includes 8 states. Those are Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee. And this was the first convention where all of those states, members from all of those states, were invited. Some of the business that we were looking into was to draft, with the new draft bylaws, there were a couple of proposals to add to those bylaws, to change those bylaws, but also just to make connections through meeting each other from different states. And, a lot of states have different size chapters. You have big chapters with small chapters, and talking to between those kinds of things can give you a lot of great ideas to continue organizing. So it was a really great experience, and got to meet a lot of really awesome people. And it was exciting because it sounds like we're going to be able to collaborate across states, which was a little harder to do when each state was its own local.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it was really cool for me to observe some of y'all's conversations that first day and hear some of the strategizing that y'all were doing, the workplace mapping, and really just getting down to the brass tacks of building an organization. And so, I just can't help but think that this merger is going to allow for y'all to grow. I'm sure there were lots of pros and cons y'all had to weigh as you made this decision, but I can really imagine that, not having to replicate so many different things and so many different positions across multiple locals, but instead consolidate your forces and get organized that way. Really, really hoping it's going to, lead to a lot of growth. And so you mentioned the higher wage campaign earlier at Auburn. Were there any other campaigns that y'all are running across the state that you wanted to lift up?
So I know that there are 3 chapters that exist in Alabama thus far. We have members at other campuses as well. The 3 chapters are Jacksonville State University, Auburn, and University of Alabama. Currently, I'm not completely up to date on the other 2 campuses, but I do know that Jacksonville State, which has a significant portion of faculty in their chapter, recently had a big win with asking for increased wages for faculty, specifically to raise the minimum wage for faculty to at least be the median minimum wage for faculty across the United States. And so that was a huge win because they got to have a seat at the table at the board of directors meeting of Jacksonville State and got a ton of signatures on a petition that they recently ran. University of Alabama has run petitions in the past. I believe their petition reached their goal for their petition. I know that. And at Auburn, we are still trying to reach our goal for our petition. So we have, like I mentioned before, we have graduate student demands of raising the graduate student assistantship stipends to a minimum of $25,000 a year. For staff demands, we wanted to raise the staff minimum wage to $17.50, which also recently they raised the minimum wage of the staff minimum wage to $15 an hour, but of course they excluded workers who are part-time or undergrad student workers in that minimum wage increase. So we want to raise it even more to adjust for the cost of living. And for the faculty demands, we really are demanding for a solid pathway for faculty promotion, which doesn't really exist very well. A lot of faculty feel that there's not a clear way for them to sort of be promoted. And so we're looking for 500 signatures. We're at almost 300 signatures. So we're really excited once we get to our goal to deliver our petition to the president of the university and the chief financial officer.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely wishing y'all a lot of luck and encouraging our listeners out there. If you haven't signed the petition, go online, search for United Campus Workers Auburn, and definitely sign that in solidarity. Make sure you're supporting these workers as they're fighting for better wages and benefits. And something that I wanted to just ask you, for those who are listening who work at a public university somewhere here in the South, who have not joined United Campus Workers yet. Maybe they're not sure if they should. Maybe they, are just learning about it for the first time. What would you say to them to encourage them to get involved?
Yeah, so we actually have several members at different universities that don't qualify yet as a chapter throughout Alabama. I know I believe we have a couple at Troy University, and we're trying to go into other ones. So I really think that even though you might be struggling with small numbers and you might look at, okay, if I join this, who am I going to be really fighting with? And that's really the struggle down in the South here. But I think that especially if you join United Campus Workers, you're able to connect with these other groups. And especially since we are now just one big local with the Southeast 3821, you actually have a lot of resources at your disposal if you get involved and get connected with the rest of United Campus Workers quickly. And if you join, we find out pretty much immediately. We have staff who look at that and will let us know so we can get into contact with anybody and help and have solidarity with them so that we can basically help them to organize, even though numbers might be small at the beginning. Every chapter starts with small numbers, and you have to eventually you can grow to big numbers, but you got to start somewhere. And I think that joining United Campus Workers is a great way to get started, since we have the one big local, which has all these resources and that can help out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're so right. It's going to have to start small, but if you are a professor, if you're a grad student, if you are a hourly worker of any kind, if you work for a public school or a public university here in Alabama or across the South, as they mentioned, 8 states are covered by United Campus Workers Local that was just merged. So definitely check them out. Reach out. I've been very impressed, and I really appreciate CWA for this investment in public sector organizing in the South, because a lot of people believe it can't be done or it's just too tough to focus on. But I see a ton of potential, because there are workers in these universities and colleges that deserve better, that need better, and when they come together, they can make things happen. So, Brooks, I really appreciate you. Was there anything else you wanted to leave us with before you dip out today?
Yeah, I'll just leave you with the the Instagram and the Twitter handle that we have, UCW Auburn, is our handle on both of those websites. We also have a link tree. If you type in linktr.ee/UCW Auburn, you can get a link to our living wage petition, as well as to learn more about our chapter. If you're interested in joining and you live in Alabama, you can always go to ucwal.org /join for the join link, but also you can just look through the website. That's our website. So please get involved if you're interested. If you're at a small university and you feel like, okay, maybe there's not that many people who are going to be interested in joining with me, join anyway, because we are here to fight with you and win.
Absolutely. And just know that the Valley Labor Report and all of us stand with y'all as you fight this good fight. So thanks, Brooks, for joining us, and appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
Got a really quick story here out of Mexico. This is a really cool one. Miners in Mexico got their company to pay them for striking for 2 whole months. This win, along with several others by the union, was announced by Section 271 of the National Union of Mine, Metal, Steel, and Similar Workers of the Mexican Republic. This acronym is crazy. SNTMMSSRM, also called more simply, and I think I'm going to stick to this one, Los Mineros. That's what I'm going to call them. That win was announced at their assembly. Hearing the deal, the assembly voted to end the strike. According to Industrial, a global union federation that Los Mineros is affiliated with, the 3,000 workers of Los Mineros initiated the strike in response to a disagreement over the profit sharing for the 2023 fiscal year presented by the company. Apparently, there was some accounting errors that the union was alleging. After 2 months of striking against the company, ArcelorMittal, ArcelorMittal, ArcelorMittal. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. They reached an agreement with the company that includes an audit of the company's financial practices, as well as some other really significant things. Listen to this list. An 8% raise in daily wages, equal profit sharing amounts between ArcelorMittal Mexico and ArcelorMittal Las Truchas workers, an additional payment of 60,000 Mexican pesos, $3,300 US, as an incentive for each permanent and temporary unionized worker, a social assistance payment of 17,000 pesos, $950 US, in grocery vouchers, and payment of 100% of wages for the 55 days that the strike lasted. And finally, the formation of a commission from Section 271 of the union to immediately review pending issues within the mine and plants. The company also agreed to withdraw the special procedure aimed to terminate individual and collective relations at ArcelorMittal and to refrain from retaliation against workers and the union. Additionally, the company withdrew labor and criminal lawsuits against the company and against the union and its members. Napoleon Gomez Urrutia, General Secretary of Los Mineros and Senator of the Republic, and member of Industrial's Executive Committee, celebrated the unity of Los Mineros. He praised the members of Section 271 for their fight for justice and dignity and assured that they would continue to strive for more achievements and better working conditions. Finally, Industrial Base Metals Director Patrick Correa said, "We congratulate Los Mineros on this significant victory. We know it was not an easy struggle. The strike took place against a backdrop of widespread abuses in ArcelorMittal operations around the world. These violations are so serious that they have led the global union network to make approaches to the company demanding tangible changes and a commitment to workers' safety, rights, and dignity around the world. the collective voice of ArcelorMittal Union Network, of the ArcelorMittal Union Network, made up of affiliates from 18 countries, including Mexico, will continue to defend these fundamental principles until they are fully implemented and respected throughout the company's operations. Again, that statement was from Industrial Base Metals Director Patrick Correa. So very exciting win from Mexico in the mining sector. I mean, that's $1,000 grocery voucher, a $3,300 signing bonus, an 8% increase in wages immediately, and payment for 2 months of striking. I mean, that's...
Love it.
That's freaking awesome.
Great victory, yeah.
Yeah, really excited to see that for those workers and, for workers around the world. The reason that companies the reason that companies will outsource to places like Mexico is because of the low labor standards and the terrible working conditions, the low wages and things like this. So if Mexican workers are able to organize and to increase their wages, improve their working conditions, that is going to decrease the downward pressure on workers in places like Europe and America, and it will also increase the living standards for people in those communities in Mexico. Because if the people in these communities in Mexico are able to, bring in more money, bring in more investment into them personally, that's going to flow throughout the community more and actually improve working conditions and the general community for workers in Mexico. One of the real kind of misunderstandings about international labor relations is that there's an assumption that, yes, even though NAFTA, for example, and free trade generally was bad for American workers, it was good for Mexican workers. And that's just actually not true. Wages in the Mexican automotive manufacturing sector have declined since the implementation of NAFTA.
I mean, to say nothing of the devastation of Mexico's agricultural workforce,
yes,
which has been a big motivator in immigration over the last several decades.
Right. Yeah. So it's just, it's just not true, actually, that allowing international corporations with headquarters in Delaware to exploit Mexican workers, it's just not true that it's good for Mexican workers. It's obviously not true that it's good for American workers. Obviously not good for American workers. Nobody disputes that, or very few people dispute that. Some would, but very few. But most would think that it's good for Mexican workers. It is simply not the case.
Well, and to your point earlier about it's really a rising tide lifting all boats, and we see the same phenomena when unions win big raises for their members, and it raises standards across an industry or across a community, right? Other employers have to try to catch up and compete, so they raise wages, right? We talked a lot on the show about the UAW bump, right? After the big contract win, after the successful strike of the UAW last year, a lot of auto manufacturers across the country started throwing pay raises out there. Mm-hmm. Now, was it to discourage unionization? Absolutely. But that doesn't change the fact that there are Toyota workers now who are making more money. Right. And so that really, give credit to that kind of organizing and the way it can lift standards for folks. And I think the same concept works internationally. The more a rising tide lifts all boats. And so, there's a race to the bottom by corporate America and, international corporations. So it's important for workers here that workers everywhere are stronger and can win and can organize and can increase the standards, right? We don't want to see poor working standards, poor wages. We don't want to see that anywhere in the world because then that's a refuge for these poor practices. So solidarity to these workers in Mexico. Good job.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk to some folks from Texas, a worker at the International Rescue Committee, about their union campaign with the OPEIU. Excited to talk to them about that. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union
talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you'd like to call in, 844-899-8857 is the phone number. We also take voicemails throughout the week. You can leave us a voicemail. We might respond to it on the next program. We got a voicemail last week asking us if Shawn Fain should run for U.S. president. We're going to be answering that question. We're going to be digging into it a little bit in the second half of the program. If you want to listen to the second half of the program, you can find us online and on Facebook and YouTube, and continue listening to the stream. The answer to that question, I think, is probably not, but we'll explain that. We'll explain our reasoning for that in the second half of the program. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you haven't liked the stream, go ahead and do that. And we have gotten multiple comments in the chat about my volume being low. I hope that has been fixed at this time, although I'm not too sure if it has. Please let me know if there continues to be issues. Lots of support for the Mexican miners in the chat. Solidarity, Local 728 Teamster from Bingo Bango 89. Infinite Content has a new job this week. Very cool. Excited for folks to retain employment and get employment where they are unemployed. So very excited for you, Infinite Content, and hope the new job treats you well. That's also Joe and Mel in the Facebook chat. Obviously appreciate them tuning in as they do every week. Bill says, we have an ArcelorMittal plant near where I live in the United States. They make Coke for the steel plants. Interesting. Yeah, I did notice that they seemed to be a global employer. So, Scott Davis in the chat says, no. But I don't know if he means no, there is no problem anymore, or if that means no, there is still a problem. It has not been fixed. So, does my audio sound good or not? Say audio good, audio not. So
we're doing the best we can.
Doing
folks.
the best we can. That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, so we have on the line Tammy Calder, a worker at the International Rescue Committee, and Emily Markwise, organizer for the Office and Professional Employees International Union, OPEIU Local 227. Tammy, Emily, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to us this morning. All the way from Abilene, Texas. So let's start with the International Rescue Committee, Tammy. That's where you work. That's where the union campaign is taking place. Talk to us about what IRC does and why you work there.
Absolutely. International Rescue Committee is a giant nonprofit. We are international. We help refugees when they first get here to the United States with cash assistance, medical assistance, housing assistance, learning English if they need that help, finding jobs, everything under the sun we help with when they first get here.
And what made you want to go into that line of work?
Well, I didn't even know it was a possibility until a friend of mine that worked there messaged me one day and said, "Hey, you want to come work at a cool place?" And I was like, "Sure." And once I got into the job, I was like, I cannot believe this is an actual job helping people. My particular role is a refugee medical assistance specialist, and I help people get medical assistance when they get here. They get insurance. It's akin to Medicaid, and so it's a year program. They're on it for a year, and they can get medical assistance at local doctors and hospitals and things like that. It's really cool.
I imagine that's definitely a very fulfilling line of work, and that leads into the fact that it's a fulfilling line of work, or the fact that it's important, right? That you're you're not moving numbers around on a spreadsheet for some rich weirdo and making lines go up or down, right? I mean, your work has a real meaningful impact on people's lives. And that is the case for many people at places like nonprofits or schools or hospitals across the country, and I'm sure it's the same kind of things are said around the world. They're told that unionization is detrimental to the mission, that for workers who are in these kinds of care industries, it is selfish to advocate for yourself and to unionize as you are doing the same thing for the people that you serve. Why are they wrong?
Well, they are absolutely wrong. We are the givers. We're the helpers. We're the ones who are pouring our hearts into this job every day. We do this job because we love it. And a lot of times they think, oh, well, they'll take lower pay. They'll take less benefits because they love this job so much. And while that is somewhat true, it would be nice to get paid, compensated equally for the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also just, nonprofit workers across the board in this country are told that because it's a labor of love that you almost, part of the job is suffering and not having the stability and security you need. And at the end of the day, who is most hurt by that rhetoric are the clients of nonprofits. Like Tammy said, IRC in particular, these are people that are coming in the most vulnerable period of their life. They're often traumatized. They are learning a new language. They're trying to get access to social services. And if you are, as an IRC worker, uncertain about your future and you don't know how you're going to put food on the table and, you are coming home depleted and exhausted, you're not in a position to help someone else who really needs your help in that moment in the way that they deserve. So IRC workers taking this step to have security and stability for themselves is also ensuring stability and security and dignity for their clients.
Exactly. I think when you put it that way, it does become more intuitive and less seeming of a contradiction. I mean, the instructions for, when you're in a plane, it's like this is kind of the common thing. This is one of the few things that people know to do if you're in a plane crash. It's to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help anybody else, because you can't help other people if you are dead, in the event of an airplane crash and you don't have oxygen or something like this. And the analogy, I think, extends to people who work in these fields. If you are completely burnt out, overextended, unable to, engage in any sort of leisure time or self-care or any of the kind of important things of life, you are going to be less effective as an employee, just generally speaking, in any occupation. But then being effective as an employee is so much more meaningful in fields like this. And Adam, you work in a nonprofit for a nonprofit employer. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of dynamic?
I thought y'all laid it out beautifully. That's exactly the case, and it is something that a lot of nonprofit workers go into it understanding that, they will probably not get rich. They understand there are limits to compensation and things like that. But as y'all said, you do it for the love of it. And because you do it day in, day out, the what's required and what you need to be successful and to be effective. And as they pointed out, in this particular case especially, we need folks to be effective in these roles, right? Because you are taking care of our fellow human beings and trying to improve their lives and the communities around us. So I just applaud the organizing that is happening and applaud you for taking the step.
Absolutely. And so, speaking of taking that step, Tammy, what was the thing that made you want to reach out to OPEIU and start this campaign?
Well, until a few years ago, I didn't even know that organizing in Texas was a thing. Didn't know you could have a union in Texas. Thought it was impossible. But I didn't know where to begin. And actually, the Dallas unit is the one that started it. And once I heard that they were starting this union, I thought, I want to be part of that. I need that in my life immediately. So once they threw it out there, I started working on Abilene and going around to people and saying, hey, what do you know about unions? Do you like them? Do you hate them? What's going on? So, and that's where it all started.
And what about management? How has management responded in Abilene, Tammy?
Oh, they've been lovely.
I sense a certain amount of subversiveness in that answer.
There's a little bit of sarcasm there. They had, so this all started back in October of last year. They called us into this big meeting about, you don't want a union. We're family here. We'll take care of you. We'll do all the things and make sure you get the pay raises, and you already get great pay, and you already get great benefits and everything like that. So we had that against us. And I'm like, well, for me, it's not so much about the pay. I want equal treatment in the workplace. I want to see better conditions for us, better conditions for our clients. And that's where my heart is. And so if we're chronically understaffed, there's no way that we can take care of our clients. Well, turn around, and it was either late February or early March, we got another email that said, guess what, guys, you're not allowed to talk about unionizing at work. And I was like, oh, really? Because everything that I have read has said, yeah, we can. So I let Emily know about that, and we got that situated, and we had National Labor Board postings hung up in our office within like 3 days.
Yeah, so, to provide some context, so as Tammy said, Dallas was the first office to organize, and Dallas was put through the ringer. Headquarters flew down. They had multiple captive audience meetings. They had anti-union literature passed out, and they won their vote with a huge margin. But as Tammy's saying, headquarters preemptively paid Abilene a visit, which was incidentally the first time they had stopped by their office in 2 years. And all of a sudden, there's interest in the Abilene office, not to ask, hey, how's it going? What do you need? But to say, you don't need this union. We've got you. You're good. You don't need to ask for what you deserve. And so, Denver went public with their union a few weeks ago. They won voluntary recognition. I think that IRC is starting to see that spending a ton of money on, anti-labor council and on captive audience meetings and flying headquartered down to try to take IRC workers' voice away from them, that it's a waste of time, and it's money and resources that could be going to clients and to their employees. So, that's what we want to see in Abilene, but it's, that is, IRC has a choice to make, and we hope they make the right one.
Me too. Y'all dropped cards last week, is my understanding, requesting voluntary recognition. You gave them a deadline of Wednesday, so I guess we'll be able to include it in our newsletter roundup of Southern Labor, whether or not you were voluntarily recognized. We'll hope for that on your behalf. What are some of the things that you would like to see in a first contract, Tammy? You've spoke some about the staffing issues and the working conditions. Do you have in mind some particular provisions that you and your coworkers are going to be trying to bargain for at the table once, Lord willing, they voluntarily recognize you and you begin contract negotiations?
Yes, for me, my big want is a hybrid work schedule. All the other offices across the United States have a hybrid work schedule where they work 2 days in office and 3 days at home. We were sent an email January, I think it was, that our office was not allowed to do that. We could only work from home under special circumstances and only with the permission of our supervisor. So that's my big want. And of course, staffing is always an issue. We're running short-staffed in our office by about 4 or 5 people. We cannot effectively serve our clients that way. We're running months behind on getting these people the help that they need. So staffing is a big issue. Posting open jobs in a timely manner, getting interviews underway in a timely manner, things like that are my big ask. Money, sure. Benefits, sure, but everything else is about working conditions.
And finally, being in Abilene, union density is incredibly low, and so you kind of alluded to it actually, Tammy, saying that you didn't even know that you could do that in Texas. You could do a union in Texas. That was kind of a new idea to you, and so what do you perceive that this means for the community and maybe the broader state of Texas that this is happening here?
Well, I hope people see that you can do it in Texas. You can go out and you can organize. It might take months, but it gets done. Persistence is a good thing. We have 127,000 residents in Abilene. Only about 500 of those are union, which is a crazy low number. And I think most of them are trade unions, the postal workers and things like that. I would love to see more call centers, hospitals, things like that join us in this journey that we have started.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Emily,
absolutely.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tammy nailed it. I think this demonstrates a couple of things. One is that organizing in the South is possible. It's necessary, and workers in the South are more than ready to do it. I think not to mention that IRC, working with a refugee population, Texas is famously hostile to both refugees and unions, and still, we're here. And I think that what that signals to the 28 other IRC locations across the country is that, hey, you know what, if they did it in Abilene, we can do it in our state.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Tammy Calder, worker at International Rescue Committee. Emily Markwise, organizer for OPEIU Local 227. Y'all have anything else that you want to mention before we let you go?
I don't think so.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. We appreciate you.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time and keep up the great work, both in the union campaign and for the International Rescue Committee. I really do appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
See ya.
All right, folks. That was, again, Tammy Calder, a worker at the International Rescue Committee, and Emily Markwise, organizer for OPEIU Local 227. We will keep you in the loop on what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to see the nonprofit organizing. I mean, it's really taken off in a lot of areas, and I think it just proves to folks that unions are for any kind of worker. A lot of times, and we talk about this on the show a lot of times people think, or are supposed to think, that unions equal, big burly guys in hard hats, the building trades. And as much as we love the building trades and they are a critical part of our union movement, right, that's not everybody. There are white collar, blue collar, pink collar, white, black, male, female, you name it. They're all in our union movement. And if you are a worker and you have a boss and someone signs your paycheck, right, and you have to sell your labor for a living, that's how you survive, then you probably need a union. And you should be organizing. So it's really exciting to see this happening in other sectors. I really appreciate the work that they do, in their day jobs, but it's really, a big deal to organize, especially in Texas. As you mentioned, it's a tough state for unions, even tougher than Alabama in some ways, at least, in terms of percentages of membership. So yeah, that's really exciting. Look forward to keeping our eyes on that.
Absolutely. We've got Boss Watch. Boss Watch is the mirror image, basically, of last week in Southern labor. We take a look at what bosses were up to in the South. We pull press releases from the Department of Labor, from OSHA, from the EEOC, and things like that. Starting off in Florida this week, for the second time in 5 years, the U.S. Department of Labor has found a Winter Haven contractor allowed employees to do roof work without adequate protection, exposing workers to falls, one of the construction industry's deadliest hazards. The department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration inspection found that an Ave Maria residential job site in January 2024, Carpenter Contractors of America willfully exposed employees to a 32-foot fall hazard as they did not require fall protection equipment for employees securing trusses and roof fascia. OSHA has proposed $161,000 in penalties. OSHA Area Director Condell Eastman said falls from elevation kill more construction workers than any other industry hazards, and yet far too often we find employers exposing their employees to debilitating injuries or worse. A commitment to safety must be much more than a phrase on a company's website. It must involve changing the workplace safety culture. Safety harnesses and other types of fall protection can be the difference between a worker ending the shift safely or being rushed to a hospital. The employer has locations in Belvidere, Illinois, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and 3 locations in Florida, in Fort Myers, Pompano Beach, and Winter Haven. Employers can get free consultation from OSHA or free information to assist in developing their safety plans, including steps to prevent falls that can result in dangerous or even fatal incidents. Workers have a right to a safe workplace, and employers must take all necessary steps to protect them, including identifying and eliminating hazards commonly associated with their industry. If they fail to do so, they can expect hefty fines like the one assessed in this investigation, added Eastman. Over in Texas, the U.S. Department of Labor has filed suit against a federal court, asking a federal court to require the owner and operator of 3 popular North Houston area restaurants in Tomball and Spring that allegedly used a portion of employees' tips for business expenses, including condiments and takeout packaging, ordering this restaurant to pay back wages and damages to the affected workers. The allegations stem from investigations by the department's Wage and Hour Division that found Tejas Chocolate, LLC, and Tejas Dragon Companies, LLC, collected the employees' tips to distribute among them. However, the employer diverted some of the tips for business purposes, in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. By law, tips are the property of those who earn them and cannot be used to pay business expenses. Filed by the department's Office of the Solicitor, the suit seeks back wages and an equal amount in liquidated damages for current and former employees of 2 locations of Tejas Chocolate and Barbecue, operated by Tejas Chocolate LLC, and Tejas Burger Joint, operated by Tejas Dragon Companies LLC, from May 2021 to May 2023 and beyond if the division finds the employer continued to use the employees' tips improperly. When it comes to workers' tips, the law is crystal clear. Tips are the property of workers who earn them, explained Regional Wage and Hour Administrator Betty Campbell in Dallas. The owner and operator of Tejas Chocolate and Barbecue and Tejas Burger Joint willfully deprived employees of all their hard-earned tips and used their money to illegally benefit their business. The department filed its lawsuit on July 19, 2024 in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. The Department of Labor is determined to protect the rights of all workers when their employers shortchange them for any reason and will use all legal means necessary, said Regional Solicitor of Labor John Rainwater in Dallas. The operator of these businesses directly violated the law, denying employees all the benefits left by their customers to recognize their good service. In the mine safety news, the U.S. Department of Labor announced today that its Mine Safety and Health Administration has released results of a pattern of violation screening that identifies chronic violators and mine operators that show a disregard for miners' health and safety. The results follow the agency's reviews, which, for the first time, included more than one point of view screening by MSHA in a calendar year. The POV screening process examines all U.S. mines and identifies those with a
high number of significant and substantial violations and other safety and health compliance problems. An SNS violation is one that could contribute in a significant and substantial way to the cause and effect of a safety or health hazard. Under the Mine Act, MSHA identifies mines exhibiting a pattern of SNS violations and has the authority to issue mine operators a POV notice, one of the agency's toughest in pattern of violators notice, not point of view. What a dummy I am. POV notice is one of the agency's toughest enforcement actions if warranted. If a mine has received a pattern of violations notice and commits additional SNS violations, MSHA is authorized to withdraw miners from the affected area except those necessary to correct the violation. A central tenet of a good job is safety is a safe and healthy workplace, said Assistant Secretary for Mine Safety and Health, Chris Williamson. The Biden-Harris administration will continue to use all the tools with which Congress empowered MSHA to protect the health and safety of the nation's miners. MSHA conducted a pattern of violation screening of mines for a 12-month enforcement period ending on April 30th, 2024, and identified mine number 39 in McDowell County, West Virginia. Met the initial POV criteria for the existence of a pattern of violations under Section 104E of the Mine Act. While the mine, operated by Twin State Mining Incorporated, met the initial POV screening criteria, MSHA reviewed mitigating circumstances. This review can result in MSHA issuing a POV notice, postponing issuance, or not issuing a notice. After its review, MSHA determined that issuing a POV notice was not warranted. The agency also announced that POV notices issued to the following mines remain in effect. Mines in Louisiana, multiple mines in Louisiana who MSHA has identified a pattern of SNS violations. Operators placed on a POV notice who commit SNS violations are required to withdraw miners from the affected area until MSHA determines that the violation has been abated. So this is, as I said, a very serious thing that MSHA is able to do. Wanted to wrap up with one dishonorable mention. A worker identified as 58-year-old Rodney Terry was killed in an industrial accident at GE in Decatur, Alabama. GE cut the first shift after the incident and canceled the second and third shift. Not much is known officially about the nature of the accident that happened last week, but we'll follow the investigations and keep you posted. Our condolences go to the man's family, and we'd welcome any GE employee calling in and talking to us in general about working conditions at GE or this incident specifically, or leaving a voicemail. You can do that at 844-899-TVLR. Again, that phone number is 844-899-8857. Coming up on the end of the program, we had one more thing that we wanted to talk about in the first half of the show, and that is some updates from the North Alabama Area Labor Council. The council has been doing a lot of work. Adam, you want to start us off there?
Sure, yeah. We have quite a few things that we've been working on here locally. For those of you not familiar, Central Labor Councils are the regional federations of unions, right? So there's the National AFL-CIO, that's the biggest federation nationally. Not every union belongs, but most do. There are state federations, and then down at the regional level, we have the Central Labor Council. So North Alabama Area Labor Council, we have, I believe, 8 counties in our jurisdiction. Huntsville here in Madison County, of course, is the biggest city in that territory. We represent 11 affiliate unions, which covers thousands of workers, both public and private sector. It's a real diversity of unions, everybody from cooks and firefighters to rocket scientists and engineers, white collar, blue collar, all that. So we have been trying to grow this labor council. It's still pretty new. We are only a few years into being rechartered, but really excited about some of the programs we've had in place. And one of those is labor in the schools. We have been out there engaging with high school students, talking to hundreds of high school students at this point now about labor unions, labor history, the college and career opportunities that the labor movement can provide, So it's been really exciting to visit social studies classes, career tech classes, and also, set up at career fairs, job fairs, events like that. So if anyone's listening and you have connections to local school systems, if you're a teacher or even if you're a parent and you'd like your students to be exposed to these kind of opportunities, definitely reach out to us, let us know. Happy to work with you on that. We had a very positive meeting with Huntsville City Schools this week. Feel really good about opportunities to expand that program inside Huntsville City. We are also working on Labor in the Pulpit. This is a program that the AFL-CIO does. They just brought this back a few years ago. And the whole idea is coinciding with the Labor Day holiday, that union leaders, labor leaders will make a point to go engage with the faith community. And we will put union folks in churches and mosques and other congregations in and around the Labor Day weekend just to give a short presentation, a short speech about faith and labor and the labor movement, who we are, what we're about, and the connections between what we fight for and, the traditions of faith to stand for justice and dignity. So it's a good opportunity to engage and network and, build relationships. I think it's important for unions to have allies in the community, especially in the faith community. So we're really excited to be speaking to the Unitarian Church here in Huntsville coming up Labor Day weekend. We've got some other leads in the works. We'll see, how they pan out, but we definitely look forward to that opportunity to engage, and we're hoping this will be just a good start to something that we can carry out year after year and really grow. So again, if you are in a church, if you're involved in a church locally here in North Alabama, and you would like to work with us on that, we would love to do it, even if it's not around Labor Day, right? It could be any time of year. We're always happy to build connections and build the coalition of folks who are willing to support labor, willing to support working people here in North Alabama. So, it's been exciting to work on that. And then, finally, probably the biggest thing we've had on our radar is the local elections. The city of Huntsville will have elections on August 27th. There will be District 1 and District 5 will be up. Both school board and city council will be on the ballot for District 1 and District 5. District 5 is West Huntsville. District 1 is North Huntsville. And so our Labor Council, we are really interested in trying to engage with this election with the goal of educating our affiliates and our members and our allies. We may or may not make any endorsements. That's not something that, we're really hyper-focused on, as opposed to the education part and also educating the candidates. So we developed a questionnaire, and we sent that out to all of the candidates to get their feedback about worker policies, issues that are relevant to organized labor specifically, but also working people more broadly, whether it's healthcare or housing or criminal justice reform, other issues relevant to us. So we've collected the results from those questionnaires, and we're reviewing those. And we also have done interviews with candidates. We spoke to 4 candidates virtually and had really good conversations with all of them. I've been pleased to see some commitments from candidates, willing to commit to certain issues that are important to us. I also see a gap of knowledge. Just to give an example for folks, candidates in North Alabama, we have found, are not familiar with union print shops. So if you are listening from more of a union stronghold, of course, that's a pretty standard practice that anyone running for school board or city council or, other offices that may want unions endorsements will use union print shops, right? We try to patronize union businesses, so we look for the union bug. That's really important. But because organized labor does not and has not had a very strong voice here in Alabama in some time, that's what we're trying to build and grow. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of engaging with candidates and educating them on the issues that are important to us and how they can actually help working people through local government, there are concrete actions they can take, right? Whether it's the investment in human services, whether it's their own internal practices as an employer and respecting the rights of their own employees. And, certainly when it comes to economic development, it's really, really important that workers are centered in that. So those are some of the, the conversations that we've been having with candidates and as a political committee. Again, if you're a union member in North Alabama, you should get involved. We want your involvement. We want to hear your thoughts. We want you to be involved with the council. We really, like I said, we want to just educate folks on here's where the candidates stand on issues relevant to workers, because Huntsville is the biggest city in the state now, and we really want to start dialogue about what would a pro-worker Huntsville look like? What would a more worker-friendly Huntsville look like? We recognize that, poor and working class people are the majority, and so we need candidates who are going to champion our interest, and we need officials who will obviously push for our interest, but I think if nothing else, at least pick up the phone and have dialogue with us. And I think that's where we're at in a lot of situations. We're trying to establish our presence. And I think a lot of Alabama politicians are not used to having to respect organized labor. And that's something we're trying to change.
Absolutely. And I know that we are not going to be, the Labor Council will be, and then we will forward on these points from the Labor Council. But the Labor Council will be coming out in the coming weeks with some voter guides, or I don't know if that's exactly what we would want to call it, but with some education about the commitments that the various candidates made to the Labor Council. So we're not going to go over those right now, but one that I will say is that on the point about union print shops, union print shops are... Patronizing union shops is really important because unionization is what gives people a say on the job, and it means that those folks are more likely to have better wages, safer working conditions, benefits, healthcare, retirement, et cetera, et cetera. So patronizing union shops where possible is really important. One problem with that is that particularly many consumer goods, or a lot of consumer goods, are no longer union made, or even the ones that are union made, it's difficult to kind of figure out which ones are or are not. But one extremely easy way to patronize union shops, one of the remaining easy ways, is patronizing union print shops for organizations and campaigns and things like this, because it's totally the purchasing of an order of shirts or an order of campaign signs or business cards is completely different than going to the grocery store and buying, a Mountain Dew or whatever, right? Because going into the grocery store, like everything is all, you're just doing it like kind of on your day, but you have to make a conscious effort to go and purchase these things for a campaign or an organization. And so you're already doing that conscious effort. So you should do that conscious effort and patronize a union shop and get the union bug. And we got commitments from all of the interviewees that we spoke to yesterday. And so that's Michelle Watkins, Devin Keith, Carlos Matthews, and Claudia Harris, to going forward and in future campaigns use a union print shop. So in the community, if you see any of these candidates going forward, and they have, printed materials and things like this, obviously there's still going to be some in circulation that's not going to have a bug, but start asking them, where's the bug? If you don't see it, ask them, where's the bug? I heard that you said you're going to be using union print shops in the future. So look for the bug. Look for the union bug. That's going to be it for the first half of our program. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, we have a great second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to be talking to Peter Dreyer about baseball labor in the second half of the program. Looking forward to that. Also answering a viewer question: should Shawn Fain run for president of the United States? Our answer to that is probably not. Stay tuned for the second half of the program to hear our reasoning there. We're also going to be talking to some other stuff and taking your calls. 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Again, thank you for tuning into the program. You can find us online at our website, tvlr.fm. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Okay. Off the radio, appreciate everybody staying tuned. Like I said, great second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Appreciate you staying tuned. So the thing that we highlighted for our thumbnail and title today was should Shawn Fain run for president? And that is what we're going to be talking about up next. We're also going to be talking about Kentucky Amazon workers who went on strike last week. Very exciting developments there. And then later in the second half of this half of the program, we'll be talking to Peter Dreyer. Also, help me remember to record that bump for WMMT after the show's over. So phone number is 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857 is the phone number. So let's go ahead and play this voicemail that we received last week on the question of Fain and the presidency of the United States.
Hi, my name is Marco Clark. I am a security officer with SEIU 6. SEIU 6 represents airport workers, janitors, and security officers in Seattle. And we were the union that put forth the $15 minimum wage in SeaTac, the first in the country. And I'm calling in because I'm wondering why the left, the labor left, specifically doesn't draft Shawn Fain as a presidential candidate. There's still time. Out of the 4,600 delegates, only about 2,000 have gone behind Kamala Harris, and only 300 would be needed to at least get the process going. Thank you.
Is the left, and particularly the labor left, not pushing for a presidential run from Shawn Fain? Adam, do you want to start with your thoughts?
No, actually, I wanted to hear your thoughts first.
So, obviously, if the question is, would a U.S. President Shawn Fain be incredibly cool and probably be, or almost certainly be, better than a President Kamala Harris? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. But that's not actually the question. Or that's not actually the relevant question. The relevant question is, or the relevant questions are, could he win the Democratic nomination? Like, is there even a remote possibility? If he cannot win, where will it be a net plus for him to run? And will this take away from his leadership of the UAW? Will this distract from the work that he has going on in the UAW? I think the question to number one is no. The question to, does he have a shot at securing the nomination for President of the United States from the Democratic Party is no. He does not have a shot. And frankly, at this point, I really do not think that anybody has a shot outside of Kamala Harris. I am not sure about the delegate numbers that caller Marco had. My understanding is that she has actually secured a supermajority of delegates, endorsements from a supermajority of delegates already. That's my understanding. And so then, and obviously, they're just endorsements and they can change. Like, that's not impossible, like physically, it's not physically impossible that these delegates would change their minds, but it would necessitate a changing of minds, and it would necessitate a changing of minds in the context that in the context in which we all live. I didn't even mean for that I didn't even mean to drop that phrase, but the context that Democrats are in right now is that there is so much flux with Biden at the last minute dropping out of the race for president for this election cycle. That has put the party in so much flux, and a huge part of the appeal of the Biden administration, and subsequently then a
continuing of a Democratic administration for many people is continuity and stability and not going back. And so you would have to really do a lot, I think, to make delegates for the Democratic Party be willing to inflict another flux on the party and the country. I think that would take a lot of work, and I don't think that Shawn Fain would be capable of making that case. You would have to make the case to delegates of the Democratic Party who were Biden delegates, right? I mean, we're not talking about a convention of Bernie delegates. We're talking about a convention of Biden delegates, like 80% Biden delegates, right? You have to convince them. And so does he have a shot? No. I think the answer to that is no. And I don't even think that Marco would disagree. The sense that I was getting from that call is that maybe there might be some sense that there would be a value in a messaging campaign or something like this from Shawn Fain. And so that would be the second question that I laid out, which would be, would there be a net plus to Shawn Fain running for the nomination? And I don't see it. I don't see it, actually. I think that there would be more of a concern of isolating the UAW and Shawn Fain and bringing down kind of the ire of the folks on the Democratic Party and even some folks on the left who have gotten behind a Kamala presidency or a Kamala nomination. Sean O'Brien for the Teamsters he's not running for president, but we're already seeing something of an isolation of the Teamsters because of his kind of running off of the reservation. And so I think that there could potentially be a downside there for Shawn Fain, the UAW, and its members. And I just really don't see the upside when, anything that he could do in a messaging campaign, a doomed messaging campaign for the nomination, he can do just as well as president of the United Auto Workers, who holds a key endorsement, right? I mean, a lot of unions have been kind of falling over themselves, and we might talk about this later in the program. A lot of unions have been falling over themselves to endorse Kamala Harris. The UAW has not yet, and very clearly, both the Biden administration, the Biden administration wanted an endorsement from the UAW, and Kamala Harris is going to want an endorsement from the UAW. And so he holds a lot of power. The UAW holds a lot of power there, and he can make the same case. He can say all of the things that he would say in a messaging campaign just as president of the UAW. And then also, I do think it would actually distract from his work in the UAW. I think it would potentially make him more of a partisan figure in the eyes of some members of the politically diverse UAW. And I think that's a risk that you would want to take into account. And there's just so much going on with the campaign to organize the non-union auto sector. There's a lot of work for Shawn Fain to do, and preparing for a general strike in 2028. I think it would distract from the work that Shawn Fain and the UAW has right now to try to embark on this quixotic kind of campaign. And so there you go. There are some of my thoughts. Certainly, again, if the question was, would President Shawn Fain be kind of the best of all worlds, I think the answer to that is yes. But unfortunately, the relevant questions in my mind are, could he win? Would there be any upsides to him running and not winning? And would this distract from the president, from the work that he has going on? And I think the answers to all of those questions point in a direction that would advise him against running. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand the instinct. Let me say that. But setting that aside, yeah, for all practical purposes, I mean, this is already a resolved question. So, I mean, if the question is why isn't the labor left pushing it, it's because they're not pushing me for president either, because ain't none of that gonna happen, right? Harris is almost certainly the nominee. They've circled the wagons. That's pretty clear. Like, she's, as you said, I think locked up the delegates, at least got their their affirmations of support. So, where that leaves Labor, I think, is jockeying for position on the vice presidential pick, and influence there. I think it also, leaves open conversations for the potential platform or positions that, this Harris campaign is going to be running on. There's opportunities to engage there. Your mileage may vary, and folks are going to disagree, I'm sure, as to the utility of that and how effective it can be. But those are like the spaces I see for contest, is right. The VP, the running mate, the platform. I do like the instinct, though, in the sense that I do believe that labor leaders could make good candidates, particularly at local and state offices. I really think we, as a labor movement, do need to do a better job getting our members and our retired leaders running for offices, because getting involved in your union is a good way for working class people to actually experience some democracy and practice some democracy and develop their leadership and budgeting skills and, practical stuff that comes with leadership, as well as just the peopling aspect. So in that sense, I do kind of get where the caller is coming from. Yes, of course, yeah, I think Shawn Fain would be closer aligned with my values than whatever ticket the Democrats will put forward, and certainly more so than the Republican ticket. But I do think the work is more important at UAW over these next few years to grow union density. That's the most important thing our movement can be doing, is growing, adding more people to unions. Like, period. I understand that there's going to be a lot of desire and pressure and perhaps even responsibility to engage in this election. But that doesn't change the fact that our problem is 1 in 10 workers belong to unions. 1 in 10. Even less for the private sector. That's our problem. There ain't enough of us. We're not strong enough. We're not strong enough to win the presidency, with a clear pro-worker kind of agenda. Not at this time. And that's what we have to change, and that's what we have to build. And so, with all due respect to some of the unions that will be investing a lot of money in this election, I do wonder how much of that would be better spent just organizing more workers, and combating propaganda, educating more workers, things like that. But, that's another conversation. But yeah, I do think looking at labor folks as potential candidates is something that we do need to look at, particularly at the local and state level. So, I think that's an opportunity to explore. But yeah, for all the reasons you laid out, as a practical matter, it's not really a thing. I don't even think it's something that is worth being a thing for 2028, because, as you alluded to, we've got this contract alignment fight. UAW and Shawn Fain has been leading the way in terms of trying to get contracts aligned for May 1st, 2028. I just heard this week that the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, at their convention adopted a resolution in support of that. It's my understanding, which is a lot of good momentum in this direction. That is, to me, much more important. Continuing to build towards that, unifying our movement, setting common goals, but most importantly, organizing more workers. That's the work in front of us. We have got to build union power. So that's what I want to see Shawn Fain working on. I am sympathetic to it. I would love to see someone like him as someone I could vote for. But I would, right now, yes, keep growing UAW, keep trying to organize auto workers, and keep trying to build a coherent, militant, fighting labor movement, which we need, and we do need his leadership there, and we need lots of folks in leadership. It can't just be one great man, right? I think people make that mistake a lot of times. People defer to, great leaders or, celebritized folks. It's rank and file workers like all of us. You listening, all of us, rank and file workers, it's up to us to really build the movement. We need those leaders like Shawn Fain, but we need everyday people stepping up to be leaders.
Yeah, and Tempest Lord Rayhan in the chat said Shawn Fain for vice president might be interesting, and I would actually, respectfully, obviously, Tempest Lord Rayhan, disagree even more with that, because you have with a Shawn Fain for vice president, you have all of the attendant problems of him running for president, minus even the remotest of remote possibilities of him actually getting the nomination and being president, right? And were he to actually be vice president, and him getting the VP nod would actually be, it would make it more likely that he does actually have to resign as UAW president, and that would bring somebody else up, and they would put the union all in flux and things like this. But then Shawn Fain is vice president. What is he going to be doing? Vice president of the United States. I mean, the vice presidents of the United States don't really do that much. So it's not really much upside that I see there. We also got a question in the chat about our preferences for the VP pick, and that would lead us to another segment that we had thought about.
Before we move on to that,
okay,
I did see a comment about Rashida Tlaib.
Oh yes. The comment about Rashida Tlaib. How about Rashida Tlaib for president and Shawn Fain for VP? Again, disagree about Shawn Fain for VP, but I do think the Rashida Tlaib would not win, but I do, unlike Shawn Fain running, I think there would be a value in her losing the nomination and putting a strong pro-ceasefire message out there. I think that there would be actually value in a Rashida Tlaib messaging campaign that would not exist from a Shawn Fain messaging campaign, and again, without as much downsides for Rashida, because I don't think she'd have to resign, since it would just be like a 2 or 3 week campaign. I completely agree with that, but also, again, acknowledge, Brandon, this is just fantasy football for politics, folks. But
it is. That's another segment I thought about. Politics as fandom. Yeah. Yeah, and there were some comments from Jose about a worker or labor party, and, definitely could get off on that as well. Yeah, just my assessment is that there are two capitalist imperialist parties, and they vary in who all supports them and in some of their programs and policies, but those are two capitalist imperialist parties. They are not parties of, by, and for the working class. That's not to say they're the same, but to Jose's point, we don't have a party that is of, by, and for working class people. Now, how you get to that point and what that looks like is covered in probably millions of pages of debates at this point, that I'm not going to wade into here, but I do think it's really important that working people have independent voice and independent platforms, and that we can build power on our own. I think unions are really critical to that. Unions provide that independent source of power. I think for the last several decades, our unions have been very cozy with the Democratic Party in a way that has not been super effective in terms of what we get out of it. And I would like to see that change, and I would like to see a lot more leverage used to actually extract concessions. Last I checked, that was kind of what we do as unions, right? We go to the bargaining table and we use our leverage and our power to extract concessions from the bosses. And I would love to see that approach more often when it comes to politicians. And, we talked earlier about the North Alabama Area Labor Council and us screening candidates and things like that. And, my instinct is not to endorse just to endorse, right? And some people, and some folks endorse, or organizations endorse just as a matter of course, like they're going to do it. They're always going to endorse someone. And, I don't know that you always get a lot out of that. So yeah, I would just love to see more of an independent voice for working people. I think organizing our unions is critical to that. I saw comments about the Working Families Party. They have a really interesting model, and I am fascinated by it. However, it's not something that we have currently in Alabama. I could see the appeal to it in a state like Alabama, where it's my understanding with the Working Families Party, you basically are creating an independent structure, but you also can run on the Democratic ballot line, or perhaps run independent or otherwise. Something like that, I think, could work in a state like Alabama, where the Democratic Party is hardly a viable, functioning institution, and certainly isn't deep-rooted in many communities. And so if you could build something that had its own independent voice and membership and platform by and for working class people, I think there could be appeal to that. As a practical matter, maybe you still have to run on the Democratic ballot line, potentially. Here in Alabama, ballot access laws are incredibly tough, so it just may be the only way you actually get on the ballot. Those are just some of my thoughts about it, but I really do think that whatever happens with these elections, you should go vote, and that's important. Voting is important. As long as they let me vote, I am going to go vote in whatever election they'll let me vote in. But that is just like a small piece of the puzzle, and organizing a mass movement of working people, that is the name of the game. That's the only way we're going to make anything better in this country. It's the only way we're going to fix any of the crises that we're facing. We have to have people power, and unions are the key source of that people power. So that's what we have to do. That's the mission in front of us.
The question about our VP preferences, we can go ahead and talk about this since we're talking about the kind of presidential politics. We don't talk about this kind of stuff very often, so we'll just get these two segments out of the way in a row. So obviously it's crazy that Biden just dropped out last week. It's been less than a week since he dropped out, right? It was last Sunday. It happened after our last program,
correct?
Right? I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy that it has been so recently that this has happened, but I feel like all sorts of things have happened. But that is actually the case. Biden dropped out less than a week ago, and since then, Kamala has become more or less the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. And, the unions have really fallen over themselves to endorse Kamala for the nomination of the Democratic Party. And I understand, just to try to be as good faith as possible, I can understand the impetus for that, to want to show some amount of loyalty to an administration that has objectively been the most pro-labor president, in the last, 40 years, really, at least. I think LBJ is the last president that really kind of comes close, or I think LBJ would surpass the Biden administration. But nevertheless, and I think that when some people say that, they mean it to be like, wow, isn't Joe Biden so great? Isn't he awesome? And then other people, and I'm more in this camp, say it just as a matter of fact and with recognition of the fact that this is the case, is indicative of the bar being extremely low rather than Biden being so great. But it does seem to me to be just the case, right? So I understand that, but the unions have really fallen over themselves to endorse Kamala Harris incredibly quickly. I mean, in less than a week, unions representing millions of members have endorsed Kamala Harris. And I don't believe a single one of these unions has even had so much as a straw poll of their members. You know, I mean, in the endorsement process for Biden, at least very, very many unions had straw polls or actual, you know, endorsement processes where members could voice could cast a vote or something like this, including my own union. But my own union has been one of them that has endorsed Kamala Harris this week, and I did not get any emails or any questions from local or national leadership about, you know, should we do this? Should we do this? And it just does not make sense to me. It just does not make sense to me, especially after we came out of the situation with the endorsements of Joe Biden having been the earliest ever in a presidential election cycle. And that really bit us in the butt. I don't think that any unions are willing to say this publicly, but I think that they must recognize this because there has been recognition publicly among union officials of how much more energized their politically active members are about volunteering and voting for Kamala Harris over Joe Biden, right? There has been, among the Democratic base, it is palpable the amount of energy and invigoration that Joe Biden leaving the race has created. I mean, that is just the case. And yet, literally a week ago, unions were dead set against and coming out very strongly against Joe Biden leaving the race. And so if you put these two things together, the only thing that you can deduce from that is that unions made a mistake by either endorsing early or by staying so strong with that endorsement. Because unions are now recognizing that, Kamala Harris seems like she has a better chance of winning and our members like her more. Or maybe they don't like her more, but they're more excited to work for her, right? I mean, if you recognize that, and if you're willing to say that publicly, then it must logically have been a mistake to maintain the endorsement for so long. And so, with that context, existing in that context, it's just kind of difficult to understand why the rush to endorse Kamala Harris. And then we have seen within this rush to endorse Kamala Harris, there's now the Veep stakes, where two of the front runners apparently are Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and Mark Kelly of Arizona, both candidates that Labor would be opposed to and are concerned about. Mark Kelly, because he has been a longtime opponent of the PRO Act. He has not supported the confirmations of David Wheel to the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor and Julie Su to Secretary of the Department of Labor. He's been a very just generally pro-business, anti-union politician. And then Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania as governor has been a very strong proponent of school privatization, been a very big opponent of teachers' unions. And so if unions had not endorsed yet, you could see that those endorsements being used as leverage for the VP pick. And it's difficult for me to understand why the rush. I just don't understand it. I'm not saying that, the leaders are like evil or, they're totally stupid and they don't understand anything or anything like that. I tend to try to ascribe good faith and to disagreements, especially within the House of Labor, because I can't imagine why somebody would want to be a union leader if they don't care at least a little bit about working people. Because you could make so much more money, working for Littler Mendelson, right? As an attorney, especially if you are a prominent union leader, right? I mean, Liz Shuler right now makes something like $200,000 or $300,000. She could overnight triple that amount of money if she went and worked for Littler Mendelsohn or any one of these other anti-union law firms. And so, there has to be some amount of commitment to the cause. And so I want to try to be willing to extend that good faith, but it is difficult for me to understand. And kind of along these lines, Shawn Fain was interviewed on MSNBC last night by Ali Velshi. And he kind of went over the case for why they're not in any rush. Let's play this clip.
Joe Biden's been the most pro-labor president in memory, and he was the first sitting president to join a picket line when he marched in solidarity with the United Auto Workers during their strike last fall, which is one reason why the UAW endorsed Biden for president back in January of this year. The union has not yet endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for the same job. So what inroads does she need to make with organized labor ahead of November's election? Joining me now is someone well suited to answer that question. Shawn Fain is the president of the United Auto Workers Union. Shawn, it's good to see you. We can do this the easy way or the long way. If you want to do it the easy way, you can tell me if you're going to endorse Kamala Harris, then we can talk about Olympics for 5 minutes.
That sounds like a plan. Hey, thanks, Ali. Thanks for having us. Hey, look, as I said earlier, we have a process we follow when we do this. And, our membership drives this union now. It's not a top-down organization. So, we've been having discussions with our executive committee. I was able to talk to Vice President Harris on Wednesday. We tried hooking up, the last few days throughout the week and just couldn't make it work. And so we were able to talk, had a really good conversation, as we always have. And I told her, expectations we have, things we'd like to see. But our board, we are reaching out to leaders all over the nation and our regions and stuff and getting feedback from them, what they want to see, as we always do. And then, we'll make when we make an endorsement, we'll make that announcement on our time, nobody else's. So that's how we do things in the UAW.
Let's talk about it. It's interesting because a lot of people don't know about the evolution of unions like yours, where you say it's not top down, it's consultative, and you talk about expectations and what you'd like to see. Can you tell me what some of those things are? Some of the things you'd like a presidential candidate to commit to in exchange for your support?
Look, this election's about one thing. It's about taking our lives back. It's about a working class that's been left behind for decades due to corporate greed and runaway greed at the top. And so, we have what we call our 4 core issues. And those are, a living wage. And that doesn't mean, a bare minimum. That means a living wage where when someone goes to work, no matter what work they do, they can live a decent life. Adequate health care for everybody. There's no excuse in the richest nation in the world that we don't have health care for everyone. It should be a right. Retirement security. Retirement security is a must. 60% of the people in this nation have no retirement savings, not because they're not responsible, but because they don't make enough money to save anything. And then the final thing is taking our time back, taking our lives back. I mean, many workers in the working class work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, or 2 and 3 jobs just to scrape to get by. And that's not a life. So, working class people are fed up with basically working their asses off and generating all these massive profits for these companies and then being left behind. That doesn't work for us. So those to me are the core 4 things that got to happen in this country.
That's
why 75% of Americans supported us in that fight.
That was quite a strike that you guys had and met with great success in that. Senator Mark Kelly, one of the people who is being thought about as a vice presidential candidate, he's on the short list to join the Harris ticket, just endorsed the PRO Act, something he hadn't done. It's a massive piece of labor rights legislation. Do you take that as a sign that union rights are going to be a red line for the Kamala Harris campaign?
Look, they should be. Anyone that didn't support the PRO Act does not support working class people, in my opinion. And, that's got to happen. That's a must for us. But
Got it. Okay. So there you go. That's kind of the case for, why the worry, why the hurry. We can always endorse later, and you might get some leverage for that. I suppose the argument against that and in favor of endorsing early would be that potentially you would see that if we endorse early, our loyalty will be rewarded. And so, I don't know if, I don't know if that's worked,
Yeah, look at the last 40, 50 years and get back to me on how effective that's been, that kind of subservient type role in relationship. I mean, frankly, we need to be in a position where the Democrats and Republicans are both coming to us, begging us for endorsements and support, right? Because they fear us. That's where we need to be. Right. And we're not there yet. But certainly I think we're in a better place than we were even, 4 years ago in terms of the resurgence of this labor movement and the growth of organizing and, the growth of important leaders. But, we're just not there yet where they should really be coming to us and begging for our help.
Yeah, and so then what are our preferences for VP? I won't express specifically my own preferences, but I will report the reported preferences of unions and say that I am sympathetic to unions, and so people can deduce from that what they want. But reportedly, the preferences for VP are Andy Beshear of Kentucky and Tim Walz of Minnesota. Tim Walz of Minnesota has passed a significant amount of progressive legislation, free school lunch for children, among many, many, many other things, and is very popular in his home state of Minnesota. Andy Beshear is the governor of Kentucky, one of the most popular governors in the country, despite being a pretty down-the-line Democrat in a very red state, has something like 60 to 64% approval rating. And despite that, has stood up for trans children, vetoed a bill to ban gender-affirming care, all gender-affirming care for minors in the state of Kentucky. He has been a fierce advocate of public education, has opposed voucher programs in the wake of the onslaught of the school privatization people, has publicly supported union contract campaigns, walked picket lines and things like this, has spoken at many, many, many union conventions and union events, and has a very strong relationship with the Kentucky AFL-CIO and its affiliate unions. And so those are reportedly the preferences of organized labor. Andy Beshear of Kentucky and Tim Walz of Minnesota. And they don't sound bad to me. So there we go. And that's all I had on that.
The only other one that I've heard is Gretchen Whitmer.
Yes.
From Michigan. Michigan, of course, famously repealed right-to-work legislation.
Reinstituted prevailing wage.
Right. So I have seen some labor folks, are supportive of her and her record. So, those are some of the ones that, we're seeing out there in conversation. And then, obviously, as you pointed out, there's some that are a little less friendly to labor that are in the conversation as well.
So there you go. That's our politics quota for a little bit, I think. There's a Amazon Teamsters in Kentucky went on a one-day strike last week. A very exciting development. You will remember that DHL workers in northern Kentucky recently unionized and then won a first contract with the Teamsters. Amazon workers in northern Kentucky, right across the street from the DHL facility at Amazon's largest air hub in the world in northern Kentucky, have been organizing with the Amazon Labor Union for a year, 18 months, something like that. It's been a, the campaign has been in the works for a long time. And the Amazon Labor Union in Kentucky, actually, even before the union in New York did this, the organization the union campaign in Kentucky affiliated with the Teamsters before they did in New York. So they have been with the Teamsters now for some time, and they have not had their union election yet. They have not filed a petition or requested recognition at this point. In part, they say, because there has been significant anti-union retaliatory behavior from Amazon in Kentucky, illegal, unfair labor practices and things like this, making it difficult to organize. And so in protest of that, workers at Amazon, organizing with the Teamsters, went on a one-day unfair labor practices strike last week. And the news locally covered it, and some folks spoke to some of the reasons that they were striking. Let's play that clip.
Behind Amazon's Prime Day success are workers wanting better wages and working conditions. Prime shoppers beware, Amazon Air is unfair, chanted a crowd outside of the Amazon Air hub.
The workers get no slice of that pie. We do not get a bonus, we do not get a raise for it. The managers get bonuses, though, and then they send their labor consultants out, the union busters out, and pay them thousands of dollars a week.
Neely says it would cause a ripple effect for other locations if the 4,000-person warehouse were to unionize. Picketers were only planning to be outside today, but Neely says the purpose was to encourage others to not be scared of retaliation.
We go in tomorrow as planned, and then we talk to our co-workers and tell them that, we were not retaliated against because we were public about this, and we continue to build momentum every day, every week.
In a statement, Amazon says our employees have the choice of whether or not to join a union. They always have. We favor opportunities for each person to be respected and valued as an individual. Amazon delivery drivers from Illinois, who have been striking since the end of June, were also there.
I've been working at Amazon for a year now. The only reason why I stayed through past the first few months is because I learned of this unionization.
Amazon says it already offers competitive pay, health benefits from day one, and career growth. The company also says full-time employees there have a starting wage of $21 up to $23. And a 401k. The union wants its workers to be paid $30 an hour.
I can tell you that I'm already on food stamps, I'm already on assistance, I'm already on Medicaid. I qualify for that working for Amazon, for the biggest employer and the biggest company in the world.
This was a 3-hour walkout. The Teamsters are due in court next month over what they say are Amazon's attempts to keep its employees from unionizing.
So there you go. And that last statement from an Amazon worker is really important. I think it is absolutely absurd that a worker for the largest company in the world, is it the largest private employer in the United States? If it's not the largest, it is certainly one of the largest, one of the most profitable companies in the world, one of the most valuable companies in the world. The idea that an employee for such a company could qualify for food stamps is, look, I'm not a proponent of prisons generally. I think that we should vastly reduce the criminal legal system's encroachment into people's lives. But if we're gonna have prisons, I think that this kind of stuff is criminal. Is really criminal. The idea that you are sentencing people who make you so profitable to poverty is really criminal. If that word had any meaning, then that would be true legally as well as morally.
Well, it's subsidized low wages, right? When these large corporations like Amazon and Walmart and others, when they pay these low wages and lack of benefits, and the rest of us as taxpayers actually pitch in, right? Because these folks are still poor enough to qualify for Medicaid, food stamps, WIC, other services. And so, a company like Amazon or Walmart isn't even isn't even providing the full reproduction of the labor, right? The government is having to step in. All of us are having to step in. And so, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I think it's important that folks do recognize that here's one of the richest men on earth from this company, one of the most profitable companies on earth. And yeah, all of us as taxpayers are helping to subsidize their low wages, because otherwise their workers wouldn't survive. Like, literally wouldn't have food for their families. It's wild.
Yeah, it really is absolutely crazy. We have a regular listener, Brandon from Kentucky, who works at Amazon and is part of this union campaign. So let's go, Brandon. Appreciate your work on the campaign. He said in the chat that he was in that clip, so very cool. And cool to see that kind of stuff. This also comes on the heels of the U.S. Senate's Help Committee's report on working conditions at Amazon, and in particular the statistic that most sticks out, and I really need to invite somebody to do a deep dive on this report and talk to us about it, because there's a lot in there. But the statistic that is most surprising most appalling is that nearly 1 in 2 Amazon workers are injured on Prime Day. 45 out of 100. 45 out of 100 Amazon workers are injured on Prime Day because of the increased pace of work on that day from the increased volume of sales, and the non-attendant increase in labor in employment on that day. And so Amazon workers obviously need organization. They need organization both to have higher wages and to have safer working conditions, and to actually get a good and stable retirement. They mentioned in this clip from the local news, they said that Amazon told us that they have a 401k, and it's like, well, 401ks are an effing scam. I mean, yeah, that's a scam. That puts all of the risk on retirement on the employees. They didn't even say, they say we offer a 401k. Does that mean that all of the contributions have to come from the employees, or do you match contributions? What kind of stuff does that look like? But it's a defined contribution, not defined benefits. So all of the risk, again, for retirement is on the employees, not the employer. So there are very real scenarios in which a person can dedicate their life to a company, to an organization, and come out the end at 60, 65, 70 years old and not have enough money to comfortably retire with dignity. 401ks are a scam. They don't offer a pension. And they're going to have to get a union to get a pension. UPS has a pension because of the Teamsters. Yeah, Jeff, did you say that we have our guest in the Zoom? We do. Okay, very cool. Very cool. So we talked about how we're going to be talking to Peter Dreyer about baseball labor. About labor in baseball. Excited to have this conversation. Peter Dreyer is an E.P. Clapp Distinguished Professor of Politics. He is the founding chair of the Urban and Environmental Policy Department at Occidental College and co-founder and co-coordinator of the Campaign Semester Program at Occidental College in California. Peter, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Appreciate your time.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And something that I noticed when we were booking you for the show is that you have quite a list of books and work that you have been doing. And so I'm just curious if you could introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you have been working on throughout your career and what led you to studying baseball.
Thanks. Sure. Well, I teach at Occidental College in Los Angeles, but I've had about 4 careers in my life over time. I've been a newspaper reporter. I've been a community organizer. I worked as a deputy to the mayor of Boston for 8 years. And I've been a college professor and researcher at Tufts University in Boston and then here in Occidental College in LA. And throughout my life, growing up in the 1950s and 60s, I've been a baseball fan. I played baseball. And the books I've written include stuff about urban politics. And I wrote a book called The 100 Greatest Americans of the 20th Century, a Social Justice Hall of Fame, which is a compendium of profiles of radicals and progressives. And Jackie Robinson is one of the people in that book. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to combine those two passions of politics and baseball, and I wrote two books with a colleague of mine named Robert Elias. One book is called Baseball Rebels, which deals with the battles over racism and sexism and homophobia in baseball. And a second book we wrote is called Major League Rebels, and that book focuses on the battles over workers' rights in baseball and outside baseball, beginning in the 1880s, which we can talk about later, and about the battles over imperialism and U.S. empire, and how baseball has always tried to use its luster to promote American empire, and many of the players in baseball and fans and others have been have resisted that, and so in these two books and in lots of articles I've written, I try to show that baseball is like any other business around its effort to make profits off of the backs of the workers, whether they're the people that sell the peanuts in the stadium or the people that are on the field. And that baseball is never immune from both the problems facing the country, whether it's racism or homophobia or sexism or income and wealth inequality or whatever. But it's also not immune from the battles and struggles to challenge those problems.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you just laid out, because I was going to kind of ask, why is baseball labor relevant to union folks? And I think you spelled it out perfectly, because like any industry, there is struggle between the workers and the owners. There's the interactions with empire, as you mentioned, interactions with bigotry, racism, various forms of oppression. So, the stories that all of us as working people in America can relate to, we can see reflected in baseball. And as America's pastime, we can see popular struggles reflected there in both the athletes, but also among the fans, the teams, everything. So I really appreciate you laying that out there. And I wondered if you could start with, how did baseball players start organizing in the early days of the sport? How did it take off?
So baseball as a business began after the Civil War, and there were lots of leagues all over the country in small towns and big cities. And then, like the rest of American business, it began to consolidate, and there were a handful of owners of baseball teams who had other businesses, and they thought of baseball as both an endeavor to popularize the sport and also to make a lot of money. And so they hired players who, for the most part, were happy to play baseball for money and to get off the farm or get out of the factory. But at some point, beginning in the 1880s, a number of players began to chafe at the idea that they were being treated like chattel. In fact, John Montgomery Ward, who was one of the greatest ball players of the 19th century and had a law degree from Columbia University, he wrote an article that basically said, talking about the slavery and the Civil War, that the owners were treating the players like they were chattel slaves. And he wanted to fight that. And he thought that there was a lot of sentiment among other players who felt the same way, that their craft, they were the greatest athletes in the country, and their craft was being disrespected. And so in the late 1880s, they started a union called the Players Union, and they wrote a document called the Brotherhood Manifesto, about the conditions they faced. And among other things, the owners would require the players to clean the stadiums, to pay for their own meals. They'd reduce their wages if the team didn't do well. Even if the team did well, sometimes they'd reduce their wages. And they were treated, like second-class citizens. And so with John Montgomery Ward and a number of other top players, they formed this union, tried to negotiate a better contract, including getting rid of what is now called the reserve clause, which basically said that players were the property of the teams, and that they couldn't go from team to team and get a better contract because they were owned by the teams. And so in 1889, John Montgomery Ward and some other players started a worker-owned league called the Players League. And more than half of all the players in the two major leagues, which were called the National League and the American Association at the time, they jumped over to the Players League because they didn't have a reserve clause, because the players could make decisions about the teams. Unfortunately, none of the players had enough money to really subsidize or own the team, so they had to find investors. And eventually those investors were co-opted by the owners of the major teams. And so the Players League only lasted a year. They only played one season in 1890. But it set in motion the idea that players were workers with skills, and those skills had to be recognized. And that idea sort of disappeared in public, but lots of players have always been disgruntled by their working conditions. And then it took until the 1950s and 60s and the upheavals of that period for players to reorganize themselves. At that point, it was over whether they should have pensions. And so that began the era of what later became known as the Major League Baseball Players Association, which is the union the players have now. And one of the key heroes, a couple of the heroes of that endeavor were Curt Flood, who sued Major League Baseball to get rid of the reserve clause when he was traded from the Cardinals to the Phillies in 1969. And the key person that really made the big difference was a guy named Marvin Miller, who the Players Union hired as their first executive director in 1983. In 1966. And he lasted until 1983. And during that period, Marvin Miller revolutionized baseball. Red Barber, the great sportscaster, said the three most important figures in the history of American baseball are Jackie Robinson, Babe Ruth, and Marvin Miller. And Marvin Miller never really got his due. Jackie Robinson is in the Hall of Fame. Babe Ruth is in the Hall of Fame. Marvin Miller was blacklisted from being in the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, from the time he retired in 1983 until 2019. He was rejected by the corporate, plutocratically run Hall of Fame, but it took a campaign which ultimately was successful. Unfortunately, it was several years after he had died, and he was quite bitter by the end of his life about how he had been blacklisted by the Hall of Fame. But nevertheless, he's in there now, and I tell that story called Union Busting at the Baseball Hall of Fame, the blacklisting of union leader Marvin Miller, in an article I wrote for a journal called Labor. But I also wrote lots of articles over the last 15 years or so for The Nation and the American Prospect and the LA Times and other places, advocating for Marvin Miller to get into the Hall of Fame and encouraging the Players Association to organize a campaign to get him in the Hall of Fame. And they sort of did. And and in writing my article and doing this research, I interviewed a Hall of Famer, a pitcher for a couple of teams, mainly the Red Sox, named Dennis Eckersley, and he sort of told me the inside story about how the committee that was set up to keep Marvin Miller out of the Hall of Fame ultimately elected him into the Hall of Fame, and I can tell that story if you'd like in more detail.
Yeah, before you get to that, I'm curious if you could just tell us a little bit more about like what distinguished Miller and what he was able to accomplish. What was the MLBPA like when he took over, and how did he really grow that organization to be much more viable and stronger?
Sure. Yeah. So the Major League Baseball Players Association started in the mid-50s to deal with pensions. The players thought they were being cheated out of their pension money, which they were. The owners were stealing their money. And they didn't know what to do about it. They didn't have any organization. So they started this organization, which they didn't want to call a union, because a lot of the players were conservative and anti-union. And like I said earlier, even in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the ball players who hadn't gone to college were grateful just to not have to work in factories and farms,
right,
and getting paid to play baseball. But they realized they needed an organization. So they started this organization called the Players Association. And by the mid-1960s, several of the best players in the league, both leagues, particularly Jim Bunning, who later became a right-wing Republican U.S. Senator from Kentucky, but who was a stalwart union leader, and Robin Roberts, who was a pitcher for the Phillies and later a Hall of Famer, and a few others, decided they needed an executive director with influence and power who could get stuff done. And so they began scouting for someone who could take that job. Very interestingly, Richard Nixon wanted that job after he'd been defeated for governor of California. And a couple of the players thought it'd be pretty cool to have Richard Nixon as head of the Players Association. But ultimately, he didn't get the job. And the person who they eventually picked was Marvin Miller, who had been a progressive in New York. He grew up in a progressive family. His parents were union activists. And after getting a degree in economics from NYU, he went to work for the United Auto Workers Union, the United Steelworkers Union, as an economist and as their chief negotiator. And he was a big baseball fan. He was a Brooklyn Dodger fan because he grew up in New York. And so he was offered the job, but he said, I won't take the job. This was in 1966. He said, I won't take the job unless the players vote to confirm my appointment. I don't want some committee of players just to confirm it. So he spent that spring training going around to talk to every team. There was a lot of opposition by the owners, and they tried to infiltrate during spring training and convince them that this Jewish radical from New York was not the right guy to represent the players. But he won the players over during that spring training, and they eventually hired him. And within 2 years, starting in 1968, the Players Association had negotiated the first collective bargaining agreement in the history of professional sports. And their typical wages back then were about $15,000 a year, the equivalent of maybe $50,000 or $60,000 now. And eventually their wages went up, their medical insurance was improved, their travel conditions got better, their food allowances got better. Previously, they weren't allowed to have agents to help them negotiate contracts. They negotiated for that. But the big change was in the reserve clause. And like I said earlier, the Players Union supported a lawsuit by Curt Flood, one of the most courageous athletes in American history, an outfielder for the St. Louis Cardinals, an outstanding outfielder who was an all-star, was often voted the best defensive outfielder in the major leagues, a 300 hitter. In 1969, he was traded from the Cardinals to the Phillies. He didn't want to go to Philadelphia. He didn't want to move. His family was in St. Louis. He had a business. He owned a photography shop, and he was a painter, and he liked being in St. Louis. And so he said, "I'm not going to go." And then the language he used in his letter to the baseball commissioner was, "I may be well paid, but I'm a well-paid slave, and I'm not gonna go." And he was also very supportive of civil rights. So he understood, probably better than any player at the time, the link between the civil rights movement and the workers' rights movement. He was very pro-union. He married an actress who was very active in the Screen Actors Guild, and he was astounded at how much freedom they had, for example, to move around from studio to studio and not be tied to one studio. So Curt Flood asked Marvin Miller, "Do you think I ought to do this?" And he said, "Curt, you're going to lose. You're going to lose at the Supreme Court, or you're going to lose your career, either one. Even if you win your lawsuit, you'll never play another game in Major League Baseball. You'll be blacklisted." And he asked Marvin Miller, "Well, is this going to be good for players coming in the future?" He says, "It will. It won't be good for you, but it'll be good for players in the future." And he said, "I'll do it." And so the union supported and paid for the lawsuit, which went all the way to the Supreme Court. And two of the people, only 3 former players testified in his favor. The rest were too scared in federal court. One of them was Hank Greenberg, the great Detroit Tiger slugger, who by that point was an executive with Major League Baseball, but he had the guts to do that. Another one was Jackie Robinson, who people forget that he was pro-union in this case, or at least against the reserve clause. Another was a pitcher named Jim Brosnan, who had written a book about his travails as a ball player and a pitcher. And they testified. And in 1972, the Supreme Court, in one of the worst rulings and most cowardly rulings in the history of the Supreme Court, basically punted the case and said, "We can't decide on this. It's up to Congress about whether baseball can violate the antitrust laws of the United States." So, in effect, Curt Flood lost his case in 1972, and he never played baseball again in the major leagues. But it educated the players, the public, and the sports writers, most of whom until that time were very anti-union, to the abuses that the owners imposed on the players, and including this idea that the teams owned the players. And so it took a couple more years until 1975, when Marvin Miller figured out a way to get rid of the reserve clause without going to court. And that was, to put it pretty simply, that he encouraged a couple of players not to sign a contract and to play the whole season without a contract. And at the end of that year, he said to the players, "Okay, you are now free to negotiate with other teams, because you're not in violation of a contract because you've never signed a contract." And of course, Major League Baseball owners didn't agree with that, and they went to arbitration, which was something that Marvin Miller had forced the teams to do through the union. And the arbitrator in 1975 voted in favor, or ruled in favor, of the players. And so this one arbitrator was able to undo the reserve clause. And at that point, it allowed players to negotiate with other teams for their services. Reggie Jackson being the first one to make over $1 million a year. And since then, baseball salaries have skyrocketed. And minimum salaries have skyrocketed. So if you play in the major leagues, the minimum salary is about $700,000 a year. Now remember that the typical ball player only plays in the majors for about 5 years.
Right.
So they're making a lot of money for a few years. And if they're from the Dominican Republic or Vietnam or Japan or someplace, and if they don't have a college education, for those 5 years, they're making a lot of money, but then they have to figure out what to do the rest of their lives. And not all players have college degrees, more and more do, but most of them don't. And so it's still not an easy life, but you know, a lot of them are able to get jobs in broadcasting and or as coaches in college or in high school. But that really made the players' union in baseball the most powerful union in America right now. But the one thing that Marvin Miller never did, he never thought that it would be possible to organize players in the minor leagues, because he said they were much too afraid that if they organized in the minor leagues and they were seen as agitators, they would never make it to the major leagues. They'd be branded as troublemakers. And so he never even tried to organize the minor leagues. But about 4 or 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, some minor league players began to talk to each other about unionizing, because they were making the tip about 15 to 20,000 a year. They were making less than minimum wage in some cases. You know, they were glad to be playing professional baseball. Very few of them knew, most of them knew they would never make it to the majors, but they always had that dream. But their financial and housing situations were just awful, really awful. It was like a sweatshop until they got to maybe AAA. And even then, the top minor leagues, they still had a problem of making ends meet. Most of them had to have jobs during the off season just to pay the rent. And so a few players began to talk to each other. And by 2019 and 2020, Major League Baseball began to take interest in what they were doing and began to support them financially in terms of organizing. And in 2021, they won. They won a contract. They won. The Major League Baseball owners, most of whom were billionaires, caved in and basically recognized the Major League Baseball Players Association as the bargaining agent for minor league players. Now, there are only about 800 players in the major leagues every season. So that's roughly how many players the Players Association represented. And there are 5,000 players in the minor leagues. So now the Baseball Players Association represents 5,000 minor leaguers plus 800 major leaguers. And what Tony Clark, the head of the Players Association, told me when I interviewed him for an article I wrote about this for The Nation magazine, it was the cover story that week. Tony Clark told me that by organizing the players of the minor leagues, it makes it easier for them to move into the major leagues and become strong union advocates.
Right.
And strong union members. And so, in a nutshell, that's the story of Marvin Miller and the players' labor exploits.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that and enjoyed that. And something that stood out to me is that union arbitration got rid of the reserve clause when the Supreme Court couldn't or wouldn't. And that's pretty remarkable to me. And I think that's a real life demonstration of the power of union organizing and why coming together with your coworkers and fighting for a contract, why that's relevant, you know, and how that can help you as a worker when politicians and the political system often won't. And, you know, something else that you said that really stood out to me is just some of the conditions that players face. And, you know, now we take for granted that many athletes are very well compensated or often millionaires or multimillionaires. But that doesn't change the fact that they are workers and they sell their labor, they sell their body in exchange for these salaries. And it's thanks to, you know, the organizing of Marvin Miller and folks like that who built these player unions to, you know, achieve these kind of salaries. So I really enjoyed the story there, and I'm curious if you just have any reflections on, kind of what's the state of baseball labor today? You mentioned the minor league organizing, and that's something we've been really excited about. We have a minor league baseball team here in the Huntsville area, the Rocket City Trash Pandas. There's a couple other across the state of Alabama, so that's exciting for us. I'm curious, just what do you see in terms of the lay of the land right now in baseball labor?
Well, as I said, there's 30 teams in the major leagues, and the owners of 25 of them are billionaires.
Wow.
And they can afford to make life better for these minor leaguers, and so they've been forced to do that through the union. And it would be fun for you to, if you haven't done it already, to interview some of the players on those teams and ask them how their lives have changed over the last couple of years, thanks to the union. But one of the things, as I said earlier, is to remember is that most minor league players never get out of the minors. And so they're never going to make the major league. So they still have to think about, what am I going to do the rest of my life? And the Players Union has tried to educate minor league players that you need to prepare for the future if you don't make it in the majors. That's hard to tell a 19 or 20-year-old guy who was the greatest player in his hometown, or was an All-American in college, or a great hero in the Dominican Republic or somewhere. But that's or Venezuela, but the union has tried to do that, and I think that's important. The one thing I think the union and Major League Baseball could do right now that isn't being done is that every year Major League Baseball uses about 1 million baseballs, and they're all made in this sweatshop in Costa Rica, in this little town, and I think it'd be really important for Major League Baseball Players Association to try to improve the conditions of the roughly 500 or 600 workers that work in this Rawlings factory, owned by the Rawlings company, but although a quarter of that company is owned by Major League Baseball. So Major League Baseball owns a sweatshop in Costa Rica that makes all the baseballs used in baseball, over 1 million a year. And those workers need a union, and they need better working conditions. They really are exploited. It really is a sweatshop. And it wouldn't take very much for Major League Baseball to fix the system. But they're going to have to be forced to by being embarrassed. It would be really great if the Players Association would, during the offseason, would send a delegation of players, Major League players, down to Costa Rica to do a kind of site visit and get all the media to show up. And of course, the workers in that factory might be gun shy about going public about their conditions because they'd be afraid of getting fired. So there has to be some protection for them. But there's as I said, there's 500 or 600 workers who work in the sweatshop that makes the symbol of the game, which is the baseball itself. So that's one thing. And of course, all the cleats they wear, all the shoes they wear in Major League Baseball and minor league baseball are made in sweatshops, mostly in Asia. So that's by Nike and other big global corporations. So that's something. You should try to get Shawn Doolittle on your show. He's a pitching coach now for the Washington Nationals, but he was a great player in his day. He retired a year and a half ago. I wrote a profile of him in The Nation when he retired. And he's the hero of my book in some ways, of Baseball Rebels. He's been the most progressive and outspoken ball player probably in American history. Although there've been lots of left-wing ball players, which I talk about in both Baseball Rebels and Major League Rebels, my 2 books. But nobody like Shawn Doolittle. He's just a remarkable human being, and it'd be great if you could get him on the show.
Well, I'm going to count on you to help us make that happen because, that sounds really cool. And I had no idea about the baseballs. That, to me, is such a big piece of it. I mean, it, like you said, the symbol of the game, and it's literally coming from these exploitative conditions. And there is a tremendous amount of purchasing power that the league has, right? And I would love to see, as you described, the players' unions work with other unions and the labor movement more broadly to put pressure on the league to use that purchasing power in a way that actually uplifts workers and supports the union movement. And, I also think about, the concession workers and stadium workers all over this country.
The merchandise, there aren't union bugs on the T-shirts, is my understanding, right?
Right.
That's something that we would really love to see, and definitely interested in getting him on the program. And something that I have been interested in as a labor council leader is integrating the minor league baseball players into our labor council during the periods of time that they are in our area. So if you're aware of anything like that, or have anybody that you could put us in touch with to help make that happen and integrate them into the
one thing I will tell you is after the Players Association organized the minor leagues, the minor league players, the 5,000 minor league players. They joined the AFL. They hadn't been a member of the AFL-CIO until then. And the AFL organized a sports council of the unions representing soccer players, basketball, baseball, and football players. And so the AFL is now a force in sports where they weren't really before. And just to go back briefly, Marvin Miller's ability to get these greedy owners to sign a contract, collective bargaining agreement back in 1968, really set a precedent for all the other sports. So now we sort of take it for granted that the basketball, football, hockey, and soccer players all have unions and union contracts. But that was due to Marvin Miller's inspiration.
Right.
And so I think
while you're going back and retreading some of the history there, we had a question in the chat about the players' union's relationship to integration within the league. Can you talk some about the degree to which there was involvement from the union in integration fights?
Well, the fight over integration of baseball, the racial integration of baseball, took place long before before the union became a power. And I write about this in the book Baseball Rebels. Jackie Robinson was the first African American to play in the major leagues since the 1880s. There were black players in the major leagues. And a player named Cap Anson organized a campaign to keep them out, player manager for what is now the Chicago White Sox. And so between the 1880s and 1947, there were a lot of black players playing baseball in the Negro leagues, but they weren't playing in the major or minor leagues. And it was Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey, the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, that broke the color line in baseball in 1947. And there's been lots and lots of books, including my own, that talked about how that happened. There were big battles in the 1940s over integration. The major labor unions of the United States were key players in that battle, not the baseball players unions, but the CIO, which really fought. The black newspapers and black journalists. There were a few lefty white journalists, including Lester Rodney, the sports editor of the communist newspaper, the Daily Worker. And as I said, the labor movement and some progressive politicians. They all put pressure on Major League Baseball to integrate. And it took World War II and then Jackie Robinson and the Dodgers to do that. By the time Marvin Miller came on the scene in 1966 as the first executive director of the Players Association, baseball was already integrated. It didn't mean that black players didn't suffer racism, particularly when they played in the minor leagues in the South. Lots of books written about those experiences. So the Players Association itself didn't play a big role, but the labor movement did play a big role. in integrating Major League Baseball. Now the Players Association is on a bit of a crusade to get Curt Flood into the Hall of Fame where he deserves to be. And he was an African American player who, like Marvin Miller, was blacklisted for over 25 years before he got into the Hall of Fame. Curt Flood has been blacklisted by the Baseball Hall of Fame. And remember, the Baseball Hall of Fame, which I love visiting because it's a great, iconic institution, but it's basically controlled by the corporations that own baseball. And they decide who gets on the committees that determine who's going to get in. And that's why they packed those committees with baseball owners and top executives to make sure that Marvin Miller didn't get in. But basically the fans and the Players Union and others wore them down until they let Marvin Miller in, and after he died, but they let him in 2019. And the same thing is true of Curt Flood. There needs to be a campaign. There was a campaign in Congress. I think over 100 members of Congress signed a letter to Jane Forbes, the chair of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Her grandfather started the Hall of Fame back in the 1930s, and her family has a sort of a controlling interest in some ways in the Hall of Fame. They wrote a letter to Jane Forbes saying, we want Curt Flood in the Hall of Fame. And she kind of deflected it. But there still needs to be a campaign to get Curt Flood into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to see that happen. Peter, I really enjoyed this conversation today, and I've learned a lot. And I look forward to staying in touch, and would love to keep the dialogue going, because this is really interesting to me. I first heard about unions from sports, right? Hearing about the players' unions and their contract negotiations on ESPN was my first exposure to labor unions. I didn't grow up in a union household, so I think that's not necessarily unique. I think there are a lot of folks out there who, this is one of the main ways they actually interact with unions or hear about unions in their day-to-day life, because union density is so low. So anyway, all that to say, I love the conversation and appreciate all your work on this.
Sure, my pleasure.
All right.
Yep, have a good one.
Folks, that was Peter Dreyer, professor at Occidental College and author of very, very many pieces of work on baseball and labor. So we appreciate his time, and like Adam said, looking forward to keeping that conversation going. I don't have anything else that I want to make sure that we get to this week. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up here, Adam?
No, we had some other ideas about things we were going to talk about, some things that were grinding my gears over the past week or so. Some other, there was a news story that Gen Z is overwhelmingly pro-union. So that's something that was on our radar, something we can talk about more next week. And I also want to recommend Hamilton Nolan's recent work on the quote-unquote working class Republicans. So I really enjoyed his article there talking about that. I find that class is very mystified in American consciousness and American conversations. People don't talk about class in very grounded ways, I think. So that's just my take on that. But as we mentioned earlier, the North Alabama Area Labor Council will be doing some voter education over the next few weeks, over the next month or so. I do encourage those of you who live in Alabama to check out Alabama Arise. There is a membership drive going on this summer, trying to grow the coalition, get more individual members, more member groups. There's about 150 member groups, churches, labor unions, other nonprofits, and grassroots organizations, alongside thousands of individual members. So you can donate and join with a donation of any amount. alarise.org. Definitely check that out. Lots of events going on this summer. You can go to the website and stay in tune there. And also, of course, want to plug Labor Notes. As always, labornotes.org/events. If you want to see their latest training, Jacob and I are in talks with Labor Notes trying to work on a Alabama Troublemaker School happening later this fall, probably in the Birmingham area. These are the regional trainings that Labor Notes does throughout the country. We're hoping to gather some folks together and have some good workshops, have some good networking, but really just gather union activists and allies together to learn and build a movement together. So that's what we got. Appreciate everyone tuning in this week. And as always, let us know your ideas and questions, and hit us up with voicemails, comments, things like that. If you've got potential guests that you'd like us to talk to, definitely do that. We always appreciate if you hit up people and tell them to come on our show. So yeah, if you've got someone that you think it'd be interesting for us to have a conversation with, reach out to them, reach out to us. Let's make it happen.
All right. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you'd like to leave us a voicemail. Other than that, we'll see you next week, folks.